As you know, if you've been following me, I'm working on a city exploration game that takes place in a huge, fully explorable procedural city. I've already talked about the general idea behind this project and how my procedural generation works, and now I would like to talk about my plan and the timeline I have in mind for this project. And of course I have to make a disclaimer that this is the current plan, and it might change drastically as development progresses, in which case I will of course announce it if it happens. So please don't hold it against me in the future. First of all, I want to make it clear that what I'm making is a game. Not a marketplace asset, not a tech demo, but a complete interactive experience that a player can enjoy. It is also VR first, as I want this experience to be as immersive as possible. But a flat screen mode is also supported and will have its own perks. For example, you will be able to run it with graphical settings that aren't supported in VR yet, such as Lumen Global Illumination. The game will be single player only. There is a chance that I might add multiplayer later, but it's just not on the scope for now. The project is complex enough as it is. As for the gameplay, I am aiming for maximum interactivity. There's a reason my procedural city has been mostly empty and devoid of detail up until now. I needed everything in place to implement a system that allows for every single small object that is placed to be interactive. And with the city being the size that it is, it's not a very simple task. The added challenge is that all the furniture and objects are procedurally placed. There are no templates or prefabs, so I don't know where things will be placed until they are generated. The goal here is that the player should be able to pick up anything that could realistically be picked up, and break anything that could realistically be breakable. Press any button, pull any lever, interact with any screen or document, and sit on any piece of furniture. I'll make a separate video on that. And of course, these interactive items are just the building blocks for the gameplay, not the full extent of it. There will be missions, goals, and progression with several NPC factions. But that won't come together until I have the NPCs and a dialogue system in place. And by the way, since I've mentioned NPCs, I'd like to clarify that I don't plan on using real-time AI dialogue that some people suggest, as I find AI output to be too predictable. Not to mention other issues like copyright and safety. Obviously, creating unique dialogue for thousands of NPCs will be a challenge, but I am confident that I can generate rule-based procedural text based on handwritten dialogue trees that will be interesting and diverse enough to give each character a personality. I am not ruling out some AI use to add flavor and variation to it though, but I'll have to see how well that works. As for the overall vision of the game, I always talk about Vuntra City as a city exploration game, because the progression will be somewhat similar to other exploration games, where the further you progress, the more new and unique locations and mechanics become available. But to be fair, I do have a bit of trouble defining the exact genre. Maybe something like Life Sim would be more appropriate. Let me know what you think. I also don't want to focus on combat. You will be able to punch and hit people with objects, but it won't be necessary for progression, and it might land you in trouble. I don't know if it's just me getting old, but lately I've not been a fan of combat in single-player games. Multiplayer PvP is a different story, still loving it, but in every single-player game that I've played recently, even with objectively good combat mechanics, I find myself thinking how pointlessly tedious the combat is, and how I wish I could skip killing yet another pack of goblins, bandits, cultists, or what have you. So yeah, if you like fast-paced, combat-oriented games, this project is probably not for you. As for the timeline, here's the roadmap I made for myself. I started in early 2022 by developing the underlying procedural generation algorithm, and created the macro city grid with it, complete with buildings, parks, rivers, and roads. This took me about a year, and I spent another year developing the algorithm for generating the interiors, which was probably the hardest part, as an interior requires a lot of elements to be believable and interesting. And like I mentioned before, I am not using any pre-made templates, only a complex set of rules for the item placement. So each interior is 100% unique. After I was done with the interiors, I felt like the outdoor spaces were lacking, so I took some time to revamp the parks, street cafes and bars, and added rooftop and penthouse terraces. And with that, the basic environment was done. I say basic because there are still so many things I want to add to it, like underground interiors and passages between them, overground walkways between the buildings and elevated plazas, and so much more. But unfortunately, I have to limit it to the basic city structure for now, otherwise I'll never finish this project. Hopefully I'll have enough time and resources to come back to add these things in the future though. And at the beginning of 2024, I started working on self-driving vehicles, as for the city this size, it is crucial to have faster ways to get around than walking. And now that I have both the cars and a system of trams in place, I finally got to adding detail and interactive items to the city, which is what I'm working on right now. The current plan is to finish the interactivity and items by the end of 2024 and take most of 2025 to implement the NPCs, missions, and progression, which will constitute most of the gameplay. So I am aiming at a 2026 release at the earliest. I do however plan to release a demo later this year with the empty but interactive city, just to demonstrate the capabilities of the procedural generator and allow the players to give me feedback on it. So this is my plan, and let me reiterate that game development is a business that's full of uncertainties, so nothing is set in stone and things may change, so please don't be mad at me if they do.